Wire confirmation pinged on my phone at 11:37 on a Tuesday morning, and I stared at it like someone had handed me a death certificate I'd signed myself. $38,000. Gone from my savings, deposited into a luxury travel account in my mother's name, earmarked for what the itinerary cheerfully called the Whitmore family reunion, 2 weeks in Tuscany. I closed the banking app and went back to my client meeting because I'm a project manager at a commercial real estate firm in Denver, and a brand new towering Lodo doesn't pause its construction schedule just because your stomach is in a knot. By the time I got home that night, the knot had loosened into something almost like excitement. I'd been carrying my family for so long it had stopped feeling like carrying. It just felt like being me. My name is Holland Vesper. I'm 31 years old. I make pretty good money, the kind that lets you live in a one-bedroom in a nice part of the city without checking your account balance before you buy groceries. And for the past 4 years, I'd been quietly absorbing every financial emergency my parents and my younger brother manufactured. Property tax shortfalls, a roof, a transmission, dental work, a 6-month loan to my brother Tate that he never mentioned again, and that I never had the nerve to bring up because the one time I did, my mother said, "Holland, please don't make this ugly. He's struggling." He was 26 and worked at a vape shop he co-owned with a guy named Boomer. He was not struggling the way she meant. The Tuscany trip was supposed to be the thing that fixed it all. Not the money. The money I didn't care about, but the feeling. The idea that I could give my family this enormous shimmering gift, and finally, hear my father say something other than "thanks, kid," before changing the subject to whether the Broncos had a chance at the playoffs. I'd been planning it for 8 months. I picked the villa myself, a converted farmhouse outside Montepulciano, 6 bedrooms, a long stone table where I imagined all of us eating pasta and laughing the way families on Instagram laugh. I booked the cooking class in Florence. I reserved the wine tasting in Montalcino. I paid the deposit on the private driver. I sent my mother the itinerary in a PDF with little icons next to each day, like a child making a birthday card. She'd said, "Oh, honey, this is incredible. We can't wait." That was in February. The trip was scheduled for the 2nd week of June. I should mention my Aunt Pauline here, because she's the one who let it slip, though she didn't mean to. Aunt Pauline is my mother's older sister, and the only person in that family who has ever looked at me like I was a person and not a checking account with feet. She lives in Phoenix, and I called her on the first Saturday of June, 4 days before I was supposed to fly out of DIA, because I wanted to ask if she'd want me to bring her back anything from Italy. We're not close exactly, but she's the closest thing to close I've got on that side. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that's so specific you can hear someone deciding whether to lie. "Honey," she said, "I think there's been a mix-up." I waited. "They went last week," she said. "All of them. Your mother called me from the Rome airport on Tuesday. They came back yesterday." I was standing in my kitchen holding a coffee mug, and I watched my own hand set the mug down on the counter very slowly, the way you'd set down something with the lit fuse. There was a long second, where I didn't say anything because I genuinely couldn't tell if she was joking, or if I'd misheard, or if I was having some kind of stroke. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off somewhere outside. I could hear Pauline breathing. "What?" I said. The word came out very small. "Holly, I assumed you knew." Oh God, I'm so sorry. I thought you must have changed the dates." "I didn't change anything. Your mother said it was a Whitmore-Only thing. She said you couldn't make it because of work. She showed me pictures, Holly. They were at the cooking class. I hung up. I didn't mean to. My thumb just moved. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor in my office clothes and I called my mother. She picked up on the 3rd ring and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Holland, sweetheart, can I call you back? I'm at the grocery store and these self-checkout things are impossible." "You went to Italy," I said. The silence on her end was so complete, I could hear the beep of someone's barcode being scanned 3 feet from her. "Mom." "Holland, you went to Italy. The whole family went to Italy. The whole family went to Italy. Last week, without me." "It wasn't like that." "What was it like?" She did a thing she does, which is to gather her voice up into the soothing register she uses for receptionists and people on the phone she wants something from. "Honey, your father and I talked about it, and we just felt that, given how stressful your job has been and the trip was so generous, sweetheart, it was so much, we thought it would be better if it was just immediate family. Just the Whitmores. You know how Tate gets when there's a lot of new things and new people. And Lisette had been so anxious about Lisette is my brother's girlfriend. She is not a Whitmore. You took Lisette, I said. Well, she's practically you took Lisette and you didn't take me. Holland, please don't make this ugly. There was a high ringing in my ears, the kind you get when you stand up too fast. Except I was already sitting down. I felt my mouth move and I heard myself say, "Who else?" What? Who else went? Tell me who went on my trip. She hesitated. Then, in the tone of someone reading items off a list she'd hoped not to read, she said, "Your father, Tate, Lisette, Uncle Bradford and Aunt Marlene, the Caldwell cousins, Grandma Pat, and Pastor Doug and Cheryl came along for the second week. Pastor Doug, from their church. A man I have spoken to twice in my entire life, both times about the weather. Mom, it wasn't personal, Holland. You took the pastor to Tuscany on my money and it wasn't personal. He paid his own airfare." I will never, as long as I live, forget the way she said that. He paid his own airfare. As if that were the relevant fact, as if the issue were the airfare and not the fact that my family had taken a trip. I had spent 8 months and $38,000 planning, had cut me out of it like a piece of meat with a bone in it, and had filled my seat with a man whose last name I didn't even know. I said, "I'd like the photos. Send me the photos." "Honey, send me the photos, Mom." She did eventually. About 40 of them. My mother in a sun hat at the cooking class I'd booked, holding up a tray of hand-rolled pasta. My father on the terrace of the farmhouse, glass of red wine raised toward the camera. Tate and Lisette kissing in front of the Duomo in Florence. Grandma Pat sitting at the long stone table I had pictured in my head for 8 months. They were all smiling. Pastor Doug had his arm around my Aunt Marlene. They looked, every single one of them, like a family. I scrolled to the last photo. It was a group shot at sunset, all 12 of them lined up on the stone steps of the villa, and my mother had captioned it when she texted it to me. 8 words I read 4 times before I closed the phone and stood up and walked into my bathroom and threw up. The caption said, "Family is everything. Whitmore's forever. Only blood, only love. Only love. I'm an only daughter. My brother is 6 years younger than me. My parents had me when they were both 24, and Tate when they were 30. And for 31 years I have been told, in every way a family knows how to tell you, that I am one of them. That the 4 of us were a unit. That we took care of each other. Only blood. I want to tell you that I did something dramatic that night. I want to tell you I drove to their house and threw something. I didn't. I sat on the edge of my bathtub for about 2 hours, and I cried in a way that doesn't make any sound. The kind of crying that just sort of leaks out of you while you stare at the grout. And then, around 1 a.m., I got up, washed my face, opened my laptop, and started writing things down. I'm a project manager. When something falls apart on a job site, you don't get to fall apart with it. You make a list. So I made a list. I listed every dollar I had given my parents and my brother in the past 4 years. I went through my bank statements going back to 2021. I categorized everything. The loan to Tate, $9,000. The roof, $22,000. Property tax shortfall, twice, $15,000 combined. Dental work for my dad, $4,300. My mother's small surgery that turned out to be a cosmetic procedure she'd lied about, $8,000. Tate's car, $6,000 toward the down payment. A laptop for Lisette because my mother had asked, because she's basically family. The cumulative monthly grocery support I'd been sending my parents for 3 years because my mother said Dad's hours had been cut, which I later found out was a lie, about $19,000. The Tuscany trip, $38,000. I added it up 4 times because I kept thinking I was making an error. $126,410. I sat there in the blue light of my screen, and I thought I could have bought an investment property. I could have hit my Roth max for a decade. I could have taken myself to Tuscany 10 times. I could have done literally any other thing with that money. And instead, I had given it to people who flew Pastor Dub to Italy in my place. That night, very calmly, I made 3 decisions. I want you to remember that I made them calmly, because what came afterward was the most chaotic 3 months of my life. And I want you to know, I started it from a place of peace. The first decision was that I would tell no one in my family that I knew. Not yet. The second was that I would, by the end of the week, cut every single financial cord I had with them. Quietly. Surgically. without a single dramatic announcement. The third was that when they noticed, and they would notice, I would let them tell me, in their own words, exactly what they had done. I started Wednesday morning. I canceled the automatic transfer that put $1,200 a month into my parents' checking account on the first of every month. I canceled the auto pay on the credit card my mother had been using for groceries that I'd been paying off because she was always overdrafting. I called my financial advisor, a sharp woman named Renata Salcedo, who'd been trying to get me to do this for 2 years, and I told her to lock down my brokerage accounts with a verbal passphrase only I knew. I changed the beneficiary on my 401k from my mother to a charity that funds scholarships for first-generation college students. I called the property management company that handled my parents' rental and removed myself as the emergency contact and as the secondary lessee because 3 years ago, my father had asked me to just put my name on it for insurance reasons, which I now suspected meant something else entirely. Then I went to work and I closed on a $40 million mixed-use development on Friday afternoon. And I drank a single glass of wine with my colleagues at the bar across the street, and I went home and slept for 10 hours. It took 9 days. On a Sunday night, my mother called. Her voice was the kind of tight you can hear through a phone line. Holland, sweetheart, there's something wrong with the bank. Your father's check didn't come through. The mortgage is due Tuesday. Oh, I said. Can you look into it? Look into what? A pause. The transfer, honey. It didn't go through. Mom, I said, very gently, I don't have anything to look into. I canceled it. The silence was beautiful. It went on for about 4 seconds, which doesn't sound long until you're in it. You canceled it. I did. Honey, you can't just why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That you can't just Holland. What is going on? I had a really good talk with my financial advisor, I said. She thinks I've been a little too generous. I'm tightening things up. Holland, the mortgage is due Tuesday. Then you should probably pay it. She made a sound I'd never heard her make before, like a small animal stepping on something sharp. Holland, please. How is Tuscany, Mom? The line went dead. It rang back 90 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. I let the next 6 calls go to voicemail. Then my father texted me, and I want to read you exactly what he texted because I screenshotted it and I look at it sometimes when I forget what kind of people they are. The text said, your mother is in tears. Whatever game you're playing needs to stop. We are family. You don't punish family. I wrote back, did Pastor Doug help with the mortgage? He didn't respond. The next 3 weeks were a tactical masterpiece on their part and a meditation in patience on mine. They didn't come at me with anger, which I think they knew wouldn't work. They came at me with concern. My mother showed up at my apartment on a Thursday night holding a tin of cookies. My father called me at work to ask if I'd been getting enough sleep. Tate, who hadn't initiated a conversation with me in 2 years, sent me a long text about how worried he was that something might be going on with you mentally. Lisette, who had no business contacting me at all, sent me a Bible verse. I want to pause here because this part matters. They never, in any of these communications, mentioned Italy. Not once. They referenced my stress, my burnout, my isolation, my recent behavior changes. Aunt Marlene called me to ask if I was sleeping with my boss. I was not. I have never even met my boss's wife, but I am told she is lovely. Uncle Bradford left a voicemail saying he was praying for me. They built a whole story about me having a breakdown so that the money I'd stopped giving them could be reframed as a symptom rather than a decision. I want to tell you I saw it coming. I didn't really. What I saw was the shape of it, the outline, like watching weather move toward you across a field. The thing they did that finally pushed me past quiet was this. My mother, 4 weeks after the canceled transfer, called my best friend Maeve. Maeve is a corporate attorney. She's known me since college. My mother called her weeping and asked if Maeve would be willing to talk to Holland about getting some help, because the family was considering options and they didn't want it to come to that. She used the phrase conservatorship. She actually used that word. Maeve called me 20 minutes later from her car. She was so angry she was shaking. I could hear it in her voice. Holly, she said, your mother just tried to recruit me to help her get power of attorney over you. I sat down on my couch and I felt, for the first time in 9 days, something other than the cold, focused calm I'd been operating in. I felt a hot, bright thing flare up in my chest, and it took me a second to recognize it. It was rage. The clean kind. the kind that knows exactly where it's going. Maeve, I said, can you help me get a lawyer who handles family financial exploitation? She was already typing. I have 3 names. The one you want is Adelaide Quint. She's a barracuda. She'll be in your inbox in 20 minutes. Adelaide Quint was in my inbox in 14. I want to be careful here because this is the part where the story could go off the rails into something operatic. It didn't. It was very procedural. Adelaide is a tall woman in her 60s who wears a lot of cream-colored blazers and has the affect of a kindergarten teacher who used to be a Navy interrogator. She sat me down in her conference room on a Tuesday, and she said, "Tell me everything. Start with the first time you gave them money." I did. It took 2 hours. When I finished, she closed her notebook, took her glasses off, and said, "Holland, I want to be very clear with you. There's no legal mechanism by which your parents can be granted any authority over your finances, your medical decisions, or your person, unless you sign something giving it to them, or a court finds you legally incompetent. Your mother is bluffing. She's hoping you'll be scared enough to come back into the fold." She picked the wrong word, though. Conservatorship is a serious legal term, and she used it as a weapon. We are going to make her regret that. She paused. And Holland, the trip. I'd like to talk about the trip. It's gone, I said. I know it's gone. The villa was non-refundable past March, I checked. She smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who has just been handed an interesting problem. I'd like to send your mother a demand letter, she said, outlining the gift you intended, the people for whom it was intended, and the unauthorized use of those funds. The trip was a gift conditional on your inclusion. They cut you out. They benefited from money you did not give them. There's a case to be made. They're not going to have $38,000, Adelaide. They might. Your parents have equity in their rental property. Your Uncle Bradford apparently does well. Your grandmother has assets. A demand letter creates pressure. Pressure creates honesty. And honesty in family matters creates closure. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about Pastor Doug's arm around my Aunt Marlene. I thought about my mother saying only blood. I thought about the 8 months I'd spent picking out the right villa. Send it, I said. The letter went out on a Friday. I won't bore you with the legalese, but it was 11 pages long, included copies of every receipt, every itinerary, every payment confirmation, and a polite, almost apologetic request for the immediate return of the $38,000, or such portion thereof as can be reasonably recovered from the beneficiaries of the unauthorized travel. Adelaide C.C. Uncle Bradford. She C.T. my grandmother's estate attorney. She C'd Pastor Doug's church, which was a flourish I had not asked for but which I, in retrospect, appreciated very much. The fallout was immediate and absurd. My mother called me 46 times in 2 days. I did not pick up. My father drove to my apartment building and sat in the lobby for 3 hours until my doorman, a sweet older man named Cyril, very politely asked him to leave. Uncle Bradford sent me a long email saying he was shocked and saddened by the tone of the letter and that this is not how we do things in this family. Grandma Pat sent me a handwritten note. The note said simply, "I am sorry. I knew it was wrong. I should have said something. I taped it to my refrigerator, and I have not taken it down." Pastor Doug, of all people, sent $1,100 via Zelle with a note that said for the trip. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." I sent it back with a note that said not your debt. I think about that man sometimes. I think he was probably a decent person who had been told a different story than the one that was true. Tate texted me a screenshot of the letter and said, "You are literally insane. You are going to regret this." I did not regret it. Adelaide negotiated with my parents' hastily retained attorney for 6 weeks. In the end, what we got was this, a written acknowledgement, signed by my mother and father, that the funds for the Italy trip had been provided by me with the explicit understanding of my inclusion, that my exclusion was a decision they made unilaterally, and that they would repay $19,000 over the following 36 months. Uncle Bradford voluntarily contributed $4,500. Grandma Pat insisted on paying $8,000 from her own savings, and would not let me refuse it, and cried on the phone when she told me. The remaining $6,500 I wrote off because, as Adelaide put it, you can squeeze a stone or you can move on. I moved on. The signed acknowledgement is in a fireproof safe in my closet. I will keep it forever, not because I plan to use it, because the next time someone in that family says only blood, only love, I want to be able to walk to my closet, open the safe, and remind myself what those words actually cost. Here's what nobody tells you about cutting financial ties with a family that has been feeding on you. The silence after is not sad. It's so quiet. It's the quiet of a house when a refrigerator that's been broken for years finally stops humming, and you didn't even realize it had been making a sound until it stopped. My phone doesn't ring at strange hours anymore. I am not waiting for the next emergency. I do not check my bank account on the first of the month with my stomach tight. My apartment, which I used to think was lonely, has become the most peaceful place I have ever lived. I am not in contact with my parents anymore. Not because I made a grand pronouncement, because they stopped reaching out once the money stopped, and I stopped reaching out once I understood what reaching out had ever really been. We sent each other one Christmas card last December, neutral and brief. That was it. That, it turns out, was always all there was. I am in regular contact with Grandma Pat, who calls me every Sunday and tells me about her garden. I have lunch with Aunt Pauline every time I'm in Phoenix. Tate. I have not heard from in 9 months, which is longer than we'd go anyway in normal times, and which I am not sad about. Last June, on the 1-year anniversary of the morning my aunt told me on the phone that they had gone without me, I flew to Florence by myself. I booked a much smaller villa just for me outside a little town called Grieve in Chianti. I took the cooking class. I went to the wine tasting. I sat at a long stone table, and I ate pasta, and I drank red wine, and I did not have a single conversation in English for 6 days. It was the best vacation of my life. I cried twice, once on the second day, and once on the last. And both times it was because I was happy, which was a kind of crying I had not known my body could do. When I got home, I framed one of the photos I'd taken. A shot of the table on my final night, 2 empty wine glasses, the candles burned down, the Tuscan sky going pink behind the cypress trees, and I hung it next to my front door, so that every time I leave my apartment, I see it. Last month, my mother sent me a long email. I read it once. It was about how she had been doing a lot of soul work, and she wanted to rebuild with me. And she ended it by saying she missed her daughter, and that family is family, no matter what. I wrote back 2 words. I wrote, only blood. And then I closed my laptop and I went out for a walk, and the air in Denver in October was crisp and clean and entirely my own. I think about that morning in my kitchen sometimes, the way my hand set the coffee mug down on its own, like my body knew the truth a full second before my brain did. I think about all the years I spent confusing generosity with belonging, because that's what it was. I wasn't being kind. I was paying rent on a chair at the family table, and every time the bill came due, I told myself it was love. The thing is, nobody handed me that arrangement. I built it myself, one transfer at a time, the first $9,000 to my brother, the roof, the small surgery. Each one a brick I laid in a wall I thought was protecting me, when really I was walling myself into a room my family could only enter when they wanted something. That's the cause and effect of it. You teach people how to treat you with every single yes you give them, and when you give yes for long enough, they stop hearing the question entirely. They just hear the answer. What Tuscany taught me, what Pastor Doug sitting at my stone table taught me, was that the price of being chosen by people who don't choose you back is your own self. And there is no amount of money that buys that back. You don't earn it. You have to take it back, quietly, in the middle of the night, with a notebook and a list and a clear head. I want to say something about Adelaide Quint, because she changed my life and she did it without raising her voice once. She told me the law could only do so much, but that closure wasn't a legal product. It was something I'd have to manufacture myself. She was right. The signed acknowledgement in my safe is paper. The peace in my apartment is not. One was built by a lawyer. The other I built by walking away. If you take anything from what I've told you, take this. The people who love you do not need to be reminded that you exist. They do not need an itinerary attached to their affection. They do not require a wire transfer to remember your birthday. And the moment you stop performing for love that was never going to arrive anyway, something strange happens. You get quieter. Your apartment gets quieter. The people who actually belong in your life, the Aunt Paulines and the Maves and the Grandma Pats, get louder, not because they changed, but because the noise of the people who were using you has finally stopped. I am 32 now. I have a savings account I look at without flinching. I have a Tuscan sunset framed by my front door. I have a grandmother who calls me on Sundays and a best friend who once shook with rage on my behalf in a parked car. I have, for the first time in my adult life. A definition of family that does not require me to bleed for it. That is the only kind worth keeping. And it took $38,000 and one terrible phone call from Phoenix to teach me that the most expensive thing I had ever bought was permission to belong somewhere I was never really invited.